Got this cool little latch that needs to be mortised into the wooden box in order to be able to lock and unlock it. It comes with a mortised type latch, a little escutcheon for the lid, a little ferrule for the keyhole, and basically I just had to router some recesses in both the lid and the box to put these two parts in, and I'll show you in this short video how I went about that. It's a great looking little latch. The downside of this latch is that the escutcheons, these two plates that have rounded ends, are nearly 3/8 of an inch, but they're not 3/8 of an inch. The chances are probably they're 10 millimeter. So my 3/8 inch router bit, if I just ran a straight line, they would not fit in the recess. The recess wouldn't be wide enough by just a fraction. And so instead of finding a 10 millimeter router bit, when I built the jig to guide my router bushing, I just built the jig with a tiny bit of play in it, like a 32nd of an inch of play, maybe even a 64th of an inch of play, so that when I ran my router along the jig, these recesses came out just a hair wider than 3/8 of an inch. It worked perfect. The escutcheons fit tightly into the routed openings. The deeper part of the mortise I did with a 1/4 inch bit, and that had plenty of space to get the job done. So here's the box, just to show you quickly in an animation. I had to do a deep router mortise with a 1/4 inch bit, and then a shallow router mortise with a 3/8 inch bit, again with a tiny bit of play in my jig. So these are the two operations that I had to complete. Once those are located in the box, you also have to drill a hole even with where the keyhole goes, and the idea is this thing just latches. It just grabs the upper escutcheon that is placed in the lid, and you'll see I think I can make this animation more of an X-ray, and you'll see that once the lid is closed, this little rotating latch, it rotates 90 degrees. It just rotates up into the recess that you routed into the lid and grabs that upper escutcheon. So you can see how that works. I have this router bushing set that comes in really handy. You can size the bushing to the bit, so as long as it cleared on the inside diameter, the 3/8 inch bit, you just then had to cut a jig that bushing would ride in without a bunch of play. Again, I did introduce a little bit of play, but not much. And you'll see that these fit. Here's a 1/2 inch gap I use for straight line routing, and then here is the one I actually used for this lock set. Again, I built in maybe a 32nd of an inch of play. What I did is made a jig out of just some junky plywood. I cut a couple of parallel lines in it with my table saw, screwed a board to it so it would register well off the front of the box and off the front of the lid, so that both of these mortises would line up with each other. And then I put the 1/4 inch bit in and used my plunge router, just ran along the length of that, or excuse me, I put the 3/8 inch bit in and ran along the length of that jig, and you can see that the escutcheon fit in tightly following the 3/8 inch radius on each end. Then I put the 1/4 inch bit in, again using a plunge router. I went down in there about 1/4 inch, ran back and forth to a couple of pencil marks, lowered it again, ran back and forth again, lowered it again. The full depth of this latch was nearly 3/4 inch because of the little latch housing is fairly deep into the wood. And once I'd done that, vacuumed out all the dust that was left behind, the lock part of the latch fit just perfectly in my mortises. Then I went to the lid and did the same thing. Again, this I did because the 1/4 inch bit was already in the router. I did the deep route first, the deep mortise first. Again, this is even shorter. It only has to be wide enough to accept that latch as it swings into place. So I did the deep mortise first, switched the bits out to the 3/8 inch bit, did the shallow mortise for the lid. And the way I determine the depth of that is you press your router against the wood, then using the depth stop, place the escutcheon in your depth stop, tighten that down, and that locks in the depth of the escutcheon, allowing that plunge router to stop at just the right depth so that the escutcheon ends up level with the wood once you've set it inside that mortise. So again, I just routed using the 3/8 inch bit. Again, I built a tiny bit of play into my jig so that the width of that mortise ended up closer to 10 millimeter than it did 3/8 inch. And again, the escutcheons fit super tightly. Here I'm doing a quick test fit, and I think with just a tiny little bit of finesse, it fit in the opening just right. Next, I had to do the screws, and these screws that come with this set are so tiny that I don't know how frustrated you get with crummy brass screws, but I tend to break them off pretty regularly. What I decided to do with these was to drill a hole. I've got this super skinny bit and this great old crank drill. So I drilled holes the depth of the screw that were 1/16 inch in diameter. And I kind of drilled those 2 or 3 times, just made sure that the sides of those holes were really smooth. Because again, I don't know, I've either mangled the heads or broken the screws so many times, it gets kind of tiring. So I just made sure I had holes that were plenty deep and the proper width. And then as another just little bit of an insurance policy, I took a bar of soap and rubbed the screw, the threads of the screw into the soap to give it some lubrication. And then I very carefully, with lots of pressure, put the screws in with some small Phillips screwdrivers. I tried to be as careful as I could, and I ended up getting all 4 screws in without mangled heads and fitting certainly very tightly. There's surely not going to be any pressure against these escutcheons to pull out. So the old soap trick really works. And again, make sure you drill the hole that is at least the size of the shaft of the screw, so that all you're having to cut in the wood are the depth of the threads. And you can see how that bottom latch works. Did the same thing on the lid, and that also fit very tightly. Closed the lid for the first time just to see that these met up well and latched well. I haven't really completely located that ferrule yet for the keyhole, so you can see that's wiggling a little, but the lid latches nicely, and you can see holds itself tightly under a little test here. Thanks for watching.